Some men buy Teslas when their marriage gets rocky. I check credit card bills. Less fun, more revealing. My name is Grant Halston, and if you're expecting some sob story about how I never saw it coming, you're going to be disappointed. I saw it coming like a freight train with its horn blaring and headlight blazing. The difference is, I decided to step off the tracks and watch the wreckage instead of becoming part of it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It started on a Tuesday in March, the kind of Boston day where winter refuses to admit defeat and spring keeps showing up uninvited. I was sitting in my home office, reviewing quarterly reports for my consulting firm, when Elise walked in wearing that particular smile she reserved for asking favors. "Grant, honey," she said, perching on the edge of my desk like a cat planning to knock something valuable onto the floor. "I'm having dinner with an old friend tonight. College reunion type thing. Don't wait up." Now, Elise had been having a lot of these old friend dinners lately. About 3 per week, to be precise. I'm a tax consultant. I notice patterns. But what really caught my attention was the way she said it, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed in the car. "Anyone I know?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Corey Lane. You met him at the Christmas party, remember? Private equity guy with the loud laugh?" I remembered Corey Lane. Tall, smug, the kind of guy who wore his wealth like cologne. Too much, and it made everyone around him uncomfortable. He'd spent most of that Christmas party telling anyone who'd listen about his new Maserati and his house in Martha's Vineyard. But what I remembered most was how Elise had laughed at his jokes. All of them. Even the ones that weren't funny. "Sure," I said. "Have fun." She kissed the top of my head and floated out, leaving behind a trail of expensive perfume and something that felt suspiciously like guilt. I waited exactly 30 minutes before opening our shared credit card account online. Call it professional paranoia, but numbers don't lie. And lately, our numbers had been telling some interesting stories. 3 charges at the Meridian Lounge in the past 2 weeks, 2 at a boutique hotel downtown, 1 at a lingerie shop that definitely wasn't Victoria's Secret. My assistant Miriam knocked on my door around 4:30, carrying a stack of files and wearing her usual expression of barely contained amusement at the world's general stupidity. "DeWitt Industries wants to schedule another meeting about their restructuring," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Apparently they're impressed with your work on their tax optimization." "Good. We need the billable hours." I closed my laptop and studied her face. Miriam was 32, sharp as a blade, and had an uncanny ability to read people. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot. If your spouse was having an affair, how long do you think it would take you to figure it out?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are we talking hypothetically, or are we talking about Elise and her sudden interest in art inspiration dinners?" The fact that she knew exactly what I was talking about should have surprised me. It didn't. "Hypothetically," I said. "Hypothetically, I'd say about 2 weeks. 3 if they were smart about it." She paused, considering. "But most cheaters aren't smart. They're just horny and stupid. And if someone wanted to confirm their suspicions?" "Hypothetically, I'd check location sharing on their phone. Amazing how many people forget they have it turned on." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Also, hypothetically, I might mention that I saw a certain private equity douchebag at the Meridian Lounge last Thursday around 8 p.m., with a woman who wasn't his wife." After she left, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Then I picked up my phone and opened the Find My Friends app. Elise's location showed her at home, getting ready for her dinner. But I could see her history for the past week, and the pattern was clearer than a forensic accountant's spreadsheet. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month, Elise had been at the Meridian Lounge from 7 to 10 p.m. Every Saturday, she'd been at various hotels downtown during what she'd told me were client meetings. And last weekend, when she'd claimed to be at a design conference in Providence, her phone had never left Boston. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and called my best friend Terry, who happened to be the best divorce lawyer in Massachusetts. "Grant, what's up, buddy?" "Terry, I need some advice. Purely theoretical." "Uh-oh. What kind of theoretical?" "The kind where a man discovers his wife is cheating and wants to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid." There was a pause. "How theoretical are we talking?" "About as theoretical as Elise having dinner with Corey Lane right now while telling me it's just old friends catching up." "Shit. I'm sorry, man. You want to meet up? We can talk through your options." "Actually, I have a better idea. What do you know about Corey Lane's wife?" "Alicia? She's a piece of work. Runs her own investment firm, tougher than a $2 steak. Word is she's been looking for a reason to dump Corey for years but didn't want to give up half of everything." Terry's voice sharpened with interest. "Why?" "Because I think she and I might have some common ground to discuss." I hung up and opened my laptop again. Finding Alicia Lane's contact information took about 10 minutes of professional networking site searches. Calling her took considerably more courage. "Alicia Lane." Her voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone that suggested she could cut glass with her words if necessary. "Mrs. Lane, this is Grant Halston. I believe you know my wife, Elise." "I'm familiar with her work, yes. Is this about a design project?" "Not exactly. I think your husband and my wife are having dinner right now. Care to join me for dessert?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Then she spoke, and her voice had dropped about 10 degrees. "What did you have in mind, Mr. Halston?" "The Meridian Lounge, 9:30. I think we might find the evening more interesting than they're expecting." "I'll be there." At 9:15, I was sitting in my car across the street from the Meridian Lounge, watching the entrance like a private investigator in a bad movie. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, the most exciting thing in my life was finding a particularly clever tax loophole. Now I was conducting surveillance on my own wife. Alicia Lane arrived at exactly 9:30, stepping out of a black BMW like she owned the street it was parked on. She was tall, elegant, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or what other people thought of her choices. When she spotted me getting out of my Honda Civic, she walked over with the measured pace of someone approaching a business negotiation. "Mr. Halston, Mrs. Lane, thank you for coming. Call me Alicia, and thank you for calling. I've been wondering when someone would finally notice what my husband does with his Tuesday and Thursday evenings." We walked into the lounge together, and I had to admit there was something satisfying about the way conversations stopped when people saw us. The Meridian was the kind of place where Boston's professional class went to see and be seen. All dark wood and leather chairs, and the sort of lighting that made everyone look like they belonged in a whiskey commercial. Elise and Corey were sitting in a corner booth, leaning toward each other in the universal posture of people who were definitely not discussing quarterly reports. Elise was wearing the black dress she'd bought for our anniversary dinner, the one she'd claimed was too special for just us. Corey had his hand on her wrist, thumb tracing small circles on her skin. "Well," Alicia said, her voice carrying just enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "Isn't this cozy?" Elise looked up and went pale. Corey had the expression of a man who just realized he'd brought a knife to a gunfight and his opponents had tanks. "Grant!" Elise's voice pitched high with surprise and what I was pretty sure was panic. "What are you doing here?" "Having dessert with Alicia. You remember Alicia, don't you? Corey's wife?" I slid into the booth across from them, and Alicia settled beside me with the grace of a queen taking her throne. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, then kept going until it became excruciating. "This isn't what it looks like," Elise finally said, which was exactly what guilty people always said when it was precisely what it looked like. "Really?" I pulled out my phone and opened the photo gallery I'd spent the afternoon preparing. Because it looks like you've been having dinner with Corey every Tuesday and Thursday for the past month. It looks like you've been meeting him at the Fairmont Hotel every Saturday afternoon. And it looks like last weekend, when you told me you were at a design conference in Providence, you were actually at his house in Martha's Vineyard. I slid the phone across the table. Screenshots of location data, credit card receipts, and a few photos I'd found on social media from people who'd been at the same places at the same times. Corey reached for the phone, but Alicia was faster. She scrolled through the evidence with the detached interest of someone reviewing a contract. "Interesting," she said. "Corey, darling, you told me you were working late all those evenings. Client dinners, you said." "Alicia, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can. You always were creative with your explanations." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "Fortunately, I've never been one for long explanations." She placed the envelope on the table in front of Corey. "Divorce papers. I had them drawn up 3 months ago, just waiting for the right moment. Thank you both for providing it." Elise was staring at the envelope like it might explode. "This is insane. We were just having dinner. We're old friends." "Old friends," I repeated. "Is that what old friends do?" I pulled out a second phone. Miriam had been busy that afternoon, and played a video. Corey and Elise in the hotel parking garage the previous Saturday, kissing like teenagers behind the bleachers. "Miriam's very thorough," I said. "Turns out she was at the Fairmont last weekend for her cousin's wedding. Small world." Corey looked like he was going to be sick. "Grant, look, we need to talk about this like adults." "Adults," Alicia said, "don't sneak around like horny teenagers. Adults don't lie to their spouses for months. Adults don't use their wife's credit cards to pay for hotel rooms where they're screwing someone else's wife." She stood up and somehow managed to loom over the table, despite being seated in a booth 30 seconds earlier. "Adults handle their business honestly. Since you've demonstrated that you're not an adult, I'll handle your business for you." The entire lounge was watching now, conversations stopping mid-sentence as our little drama played out. Elise was crying, which might have moved me 6 months ago. Now it just seemed like another performance. "Elise," I said, keeping my voice conversational, "I've transferred your things to your sister's house. The locks have been changed, your credit cards have been canceled, and I've sent copies of these photos to your biggest clients, along with the expense reports showing you've been billing them for hours you were actually spending with Corey." Her tears stopped like I'd flipped a switch. "You can't do that. That's my career." "Was your career." Turns out DeWitt Industries takes a very dim view of contractors who bill for services not rendered. Something about integrity being important in business relationships. Corey tried to stand up, but Alicia's hand on his shoulder pushed him back down with surprising force. "Sit," she said. "We're not done." She pulled out her own phone and started typing. "I'm freezing all our joint accounts right now. I'm also sending a very interesting email to your business partners about your creative use of company resources for personal entertainment. You can't, I can, and I am. Amazing what you can accomplish when you actually read the prenup your husband was too arrogant to review carefully." My phone buzzed with a text from Miriam. "Package delivered to DeWitt. Also, local business journal wants to interview you about maintaining professional standards in consulting. Funny how news travels." I showed the text to Elise, whose face went from pale to green. "The business journal? Small community, Boston consulting. Word gets around fast when someone's billing clients for personal time." I stood up, leaving cash on the table for our drinks. "Don't worry, though. I'm sure you and Corey can figure something out. Maybe he can support you while he's looking for a new job." Alicia and I walked out together, leaving them sitting in that booth like two kids who'd been caught cheating on a test. The spring air felt cleaner somehow, like a storm had passed and washed the world fresh. "Drink?" Alicia asked. "I know a place that doesn't allow cheating spouses." "I thought you'd never ask." We ended up at a quiet bar in Cambridge, the kind of place where the bartender minded his own business and the bourbon was older than most college students. Alicia ordered something expensive and Scottish. I stuck with Kentucky bourbon, and we sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "How long did you know?" I asked. "About Corey? 6 months, maybe longer. He's never been subtle." She swirled her drink, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "How about you?" "Couple of weeks for certain, suspected longer." I took a sip of bourbon and felt it burn away some of the anger that had been building in my chest for months. "Why didn't you do something sooner?" "Timing. I needed to make sure I had everything in place first. Divorce is like surgery. You only get one chance to do it right." She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. Besides, I was curious to see how far he'd push it. "And now you know." "Now I know." She raised her glass. "To finding out who people really are." "To finding out who we really are," I corrected, and we drank to that. My phone rang around midnight. Elise's name on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By the 4th call, Alicia was looking amused. "You should answer it," she said. "This should be entertaining." I picked up on the next ring. "What, Elise?" "Grant, please, we need to talk. This is all a huge misunderstanding." "The misunderstanding was me thinking you were someone worth trusting." "Don't be cruel. We've been married for 12 years. That has to count for something." "It did count for something. It counted for you having a comfortable life while you figured out whether you wanted to trade up to someone with more money." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I looked at Alicia, who was listening with the interest of someone watching a particularly good movie. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been you asking for a divorce before you started screwing around. Fair would have been you not using our joint credit card to pay for hotels where you were cheating on me. Fair would have been you not lying to my face for months. I never meant for it to happen, but it did happen, repeatedly, systematically, with planning and intent." I finished my bourbon and signaled for another. "The question now isn't what you meant to happen. The question is what happens next. What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. I want you to figure out your own life without using mine as a safety net. I want you to explain to your clients why you've been billing them for time you were spending on your back in hotel rooms." The line went quiet for a long moment. Then Elise's voice came back, smaller and harder than before. "You're going to regret this, Grant. You think you're so smart, but you don't know everything. I know enough. We'll see about that." She hung up, and I looked at Alicia. That sounded ominous. Desperate people make threats. It's what they do when they realize they've lost. She finished her drink and stood up. "But just in case, you might want to be prepared for whatever she's planning." "What do you think she's planning?" "If I had to guess, she's going to try to turn this around somehow, make you the villain, her the victim, maybe claim you were abusive or controlling, or that you drove her into Corey's arms with your neglect. None of that's true. Truth is negotiable when someone's desperate enough, but evidence isn't." She handed me her business card. "Call me tomorrow. I think we should coordinate our strategies." The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Elise had been busy overnight, apparently calling everyone we knew to share her version of events. The story, as best I could piece together from the increasingly frantic messages, was that I had ambushed her and Corey at dinner, that I was controlling and paranoid, and that she was afraid for her safety. My phone rang while I was making coffee. Sarah Martinez, one of our couple friends, her voice tight with concern. "Grant, I just talked to Elise. She's really upset. She said you threatened her last night." "I didn't threaten anyone, Sarah. I confronted my cheating wife and her boyfriend with evidence of their affair. She said you've been tracking her, going through her personal things, that you're obsessed with controlling her." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "Sarah, did she mention that she's been having an affair for months? That she's been lying to both of us about where she's been and what she's been doing?" "She said you two have been having problems, But that doesn't give you the right to… To what? To expect honesty from my wife? To be upset when I find out she's been screwing around? There are two sides to every story, Grant. Yes, there are. There's the side where someone cheats, and the side where someone gets cheated on. Which side do you think I'm on? But Sarah had already made up her mind. I could hear it in her voice, the way she'd shifted from concerned friend to reluctant mediator. Elise had gotten to her first, and first impressions were hard to shake. Maybe you should give her some space to figure things out, Sarah said. This kind of thing doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're right. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in hotel rooms that she paid for with our joint credit card. I hung up before she could respond, and immediately the phone rang again. This time it was Mike Chen, another couple friend. Grant, man, what the hell is going on? Elise called Jennifer crying, said you went crazy last night. Did she mention she's been cheating on me? She said you two have been having problems. Mike, stop. Just stop. I walked to my window and looked out at the street, where life was continuing normally for everyone who wasn't dealing with the aftermath of a marriage blowing up. Did she show you the photos of her and Corey Lane? Did she explain why she's been lying about where she's been for the past 3 months? Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this. You're already in the middle of it. She called you, remember? She's making you choose sides. I'm not choosing sides. I'm just saying maybe there's a way to work this out without destroying everything. Everything's already destroyed, Mike. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage. By noon, I'd had similar conversations with 6 more friends. The pattern was always the same. Elise had called them first, crying, painting herself as the victim of a controlling, paranoid husband. By the time I talked to them, they'd already decided I was the villain in this story. Miriam knocked on my office door around 1 o'clock, carrying lunch and wearing an expression of barely controlled fury. I just got off the phone with Jennifer Chen, she said, setting a sandwich on my desk. Apparently, you're an abusive monster who drove your poor wife into the arms of another man. So I've heard. I also got a call from DeWitt Industries. Elise contacted them this morning, claiming you've been harassing her and that the evidence you provided was obtained illegally. I looked up from my computer. What did you tell them? I told them that location-sharing data from a phone she willingly set up, credit card records from accounts she had access to, and photographs taken in public places are hardly illegal surveillance. Miriam sat down across from my desk. I also told them that if they wanted to discuss professional ethics, we should probably talk about contractors who bill for services not rendered. And DeWitt wants to meet with you this afternoon, 3 o'clock. The meeting with DeWitt Industries was held in their conference room on the 40th floor of a downtown high-rise, with a view of Boston Harbor that probably cost more per square foot than most people's houses. Richard DeWitt was 73 years old, built like a retired boxer, and had the kind of reputation that made other business owners either deeply respectful or deeply afraid. Grant, he said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crack walnuts. Sit down. We need to talk. I sat across from him at a conference table that could have doubled as a landing strip, trying to read his expression. DeWitt had built his company from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar empire, and he hadn't done it by being sentimental about personal problems. I got an interesting call this morning, he said, from your wife. She seems to think you've been harassing her. Did she mention why I might be upset with her? She mentioned that you two are having marital problems. She also suggested that the evidence you provided about her billing practices might not be reliable. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd prepared that morning. Mr. DeWitt, these are screenshots of Elise's location data for the past 3 months, cross-referenced with the hours she billed to your projects. On March 15th, she billed you for 8 hours of design work. Her phone shows she was at the Fairmont Hotel from 2 to 6 p.m. and at the Meridian Lounge from 7 to 10 p.m. I slid the phone across the table. March 22nd, she billed you for a full day of client meetings. She spent the day at Martha's Vineyard. March 29th, Another 8-hour billing day. She was at the Ritz-Carlton from noon to 4, then at dinner with Corey Lane until 11 p.m. DeWitt scrolled through the evidence with the methodical attention of someone who'd spent decades reviewing contracts and financial statements. When he finished, he set the phone down and looked at me with something that might have been respect. How long has this been going on? At least 3 months that I can prove, possibly longer. And you're certain this data is accurate? It's from her own phone, sir. Location services that she enabled herself. I also have credit card records showing charges at these locations on the dates she was billing you for work. DeWitt was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the harbor. Then he turned back to me with the expression of a man who'd just made a decision that someone wasn't going to like. Grant, I've been in business for 50 years. I've seen every kind of fraud, every kind of deception, every kind of excuse people make when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar. He stood up and walked to the window. Your wife called me this morning crying, telling me you were a controlling husband who was trying to destroy her career out of spite. My stomach dropped. Mr. DeWitt, let me finish. He turned back to face me. Then I looked at the evidence you provided yesterday. Real evidence. Documented evidence. Evidence that shows she's been stealing from my company for months. He walked back to the table and sat down. I don't care if you're the worst husband in Massachusetts. I don't care if you drove her into another man's arms by being neglectful or controlling or whatever excuse she wants to use. What I care about is that she took my money under false pretenses. What are you going to do? I'm going to sue her for fraud. I'm going to demand repayment of every dollar she billed for work she didn't do. And I'm going to make sure every business owner in Boston knows what she did. His expression softened slightly. I'm also going to recommend your services to 3 other companies that are looking for tax consultants. You did the right thing, Grant. That takes integrity. I walked out of that meeting feeling like I'd just passed some kind of test I didn't know I was taking. But the feeling didn't last long, because my phone was buzzing with another round of calls from friends who'd been hearing Elise's version of events. This time it was Tom Bradley, a guy I'd known since college. Grant, I just want you to know that if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Jennifer told me what's been going on. What exactly did Jennifer tell you? That you've been going through Elise's personal things, tracking her movements, that you humiliated her in public last night. Tom's voice had the careful tone of someone trying to talk a jumper off a ledge. Look, man, I get that you're hurt, but this isn't the way to handle it. Tom, she's been having an affair for months. She's been lying to me, stealing from her clients, and using our joint accounts to pay for hotel rooms where she's been screwing another man. Even if that's true. It's not if, Tom. It's documented fact. Even if it's true, that doesn't give you the right to destroy her life. I'm not destroying her life. I'm revealing what she's already done to destroy it herself. That's not how Jennifer tells it. Jennifer wasn't married to her. Jennifer didn't spend 12 years building a life with someone who threw it away for a guy with a Maserati. But Tom had already made up his mind, just like Sarah and Mike and all the others. Elise had gotten to them first with her tears and her victim story, and they were more comfortable believing that I was the villain than accepting that someone they liked was capable of sustained deception. By evening, I'd lost 6 couple friends and been uninvited to 2 upcoming parties. The social circle that Elise and I had built over 12 years of marriage had chosen sides, and they hadn't chosen mine. I was sitting in my kitchen, eating takeout Chinese food, and wondering if this was what winning was supposed to feel like, when Alicia called. "How was your day?" she asked, and I could hear amusement in her voice. "Enlightening. Yours?" "Productive. I had lunch with 3 of Corey's business partners. Turns out they've been wondering about some irregularities in his expense accounts. Amazing how helpful people become when you show them evidence of creative accounting." "Did you mention his creative use of company time?" "I might have mentioned that he's been conducting personal business during work hours. They seemed very interested in the documentation." I found myself smiling for the first time all day. What kind of documentation? The kind that shows he's been using company resources for personal entertainment. Company credit card for hotel rooms, company car for personal trips, company phone for personal calls to his girlfriend. Elise isn't his girlfriend anymore. No, but she was when he was billing the company for his time with her. Fraud is fraud, regardless of the emotional context. I took a bite of lo mein and considered this. What happens now? Now we wait. Desperate people make mistakes, and both of them are getting pretty desperate. Alicia's voice took on a harder edge. But I think we should be prepared for them to escalate. Cornered animals bite. She was right. The next morning, I woke up to find my car keyed, a long scratch down the driver's side that would cost a fortune to repair. There was also a note under my windshield wiper. This is just the beginning. I called the police, filed a report, and had the note dusted for fingerprints. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but realistic about the chances of finding who did it. Domestic disputes, he said, shaking his head. They bring out the worst in people. You might want to consider getting some security cameras. I spent the morning having cameras installed around my house, then drove to my office to find Miriam waiting with a grim expression and a stack of papers. We have a problem, she said. Elise filed for divorce yesterday. She's claiming emotional abuse, demanding spousal support, and asking for half of everything, including your business. I sat down heavily in my chair. On what grounds? She's claiming you were controlling and emotionally abusive throughout the marriage. She says you isolated her from friends, monitored her activities, and created a hostile environment that drove her to seek comfort elsewhere. That's complete bullshit. I know that, and you know that. But her lawyer is painting a very different picture. She's also claiming that the evidence you gathered was obtained through illegal surveillance and harassment. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. What does Terry say? Terry says we need to document everything. Every interaction, every threat, every attempt at manipulation. He also says we need to be prepared for this to get uglier before it gets better. It got uglier that afternoon. I came home from work to find my front door standing open and my house ransacked. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered everywhere, furniture overturned. The police came again, took another report, and asked if I had any idea who might have done this. My wife, I said. My soon-to-be ex-wife. Do you have any proof of that? I pulled out my phone and showed them the security camera footage I'd installed that morning. Clear video of Elise using her key to enter the house, then spending 2 hours going through everything I owned. What was she looking for? The officer asked. I don't know, but I can tell you what she didn't find. I'd moved all my important documents to a safety deposit box the day before, along with copies of all the evidence I'd gathered about her affair. The only thing she'd managed to find were old tax returns and insurance papers, nothing that would help her case. But the break-in wasn't really about finding documents. It was about sending a message. I can get to you whenever I want. The message was received, but not the way she'd intended. Instead of feeling intimidated, I felt something cold and calculating settle into place where my anger used to be. Elise wanted to play hardball? Fine. I'd been playing nice up until now, trying to handle this with some dignity. But if she wanted a war, I was more than capable of giving her one. I called Alicia that evening. How do you feel about coordinating our strategies? I thought you'd never ask. What did you have in mind? I think it's time our respective spouses learned what happens when you declare war on people who are better at it than you are. We met the next morning at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far enough from downtown Boston to avoid running into anyone we knew. Alicia arrived with a briefcase and the expression of someone about to conduct a hostile takeover. I've been busy, she said, setting the briefcase on the table between us. Corey's business partners voted him out yesterday. Breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of company resources, conduct detrimental to the firm's reputation. Ouch. It gets better. They're also demanding he repay the money he spent on personal expenses using company accounts, about $40,000 over the past 6 months. I whistled low. He doesn't have $40,000, does he? Not anymore. I froze all our joint accounts, remember? And the prenup specifies that assets acquired through fraudulent means revert to the non-offending spouse. She smiled, and it was sharp enough to perform surgery. Turns out that includes his stake in the business, since he was using company resources for personal gain. What about Elise? What about her? I mean, what's your plan for her? Alicia opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. Elise's problem is that she's been very sloppy about covering her tracks. She billed DeWitt Industries for work she didn't do, but she also billed 3 other companies for the same time periods. Double billing is fraud, regardless of what she was actually doing during those hours. She slid the folder across to me. I had my investigator pull records from all her clients for the past 6 months. She's been systematically stealing from everyone she works with. I opened the folder and felt my eyebrows rise. Elise hadn't just been cheating on me. She'd been cheating on everyone. Billing multiple clients for the same hours, claiming expenses that didn't exist, charging for work that was never delivered. How much are we talking about? Conservative estimate? About $120,000 over 6 months, enough to qualify as felony fraud in Massachusetts. You want to have her arrested. I want her to face the consequences of her choices, just like Corey is facing the consequences of his. I stared at the evidence in front of me, feeling something that was part satisfaction and part sadness. 6 months ago, I'd been married to someone I thought I knew. Now I was looking at documentation that she was not just an adulterer, but a systematic thief. There's something else, Alicia said. My investigator found out that this isn't Corey's first affair. He's been cheating on me for years, with multiple women. Elise was just the latest. Does she know that? Not yet, but I think she's about to find out. Alicia's investigator was a thin, nervous man named Paul, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than sitting in a coffee shop discussing other people's personal disasters. But he was thorough. I had to give him that. Mrs. Lane asked me to compile a comprehensive report on her husband's activities, he said, sliding a thick folder across the table. What I found was extensive. The folder contained photographs, credit card records, hotel receipts, and phone logs going back 3 years. Corey Lane had been a busy man, conducting affairs with at least 6 different women during his marriage to Alicia. The interesting thing, Paul continued, is the pattern. He targets women who are married, preferably to men who make less money than he does. He presents himself as a successful businessman who can offer them a more exciting life, then moves on when they start making demands. What kind of demands? I asked. Usually they want him to leave his wife. When he refuses, they threaten to tell their husbands or go public with the affair. That's when he cuts them off and finds someone new. I thought about Elise, about her sudden interest in expensive clothes and jewelry, her talk about upgrading our lifestyle. She'd been auditioning for the role of Corey's next wife, not realizing she was just his latest temporary distraction. Where is he in the pattern with Elise? Alicia asked. Based on the timeline and his behavior with previous women, I'd say he's about ready to move on. Probably already has someone else lined up. That evening, I called Terry to update him on the divorce proceedings and the new evidence we'd gathered. His response was exactly what I'd expected from someone who'd been practicing family law for 20 years. Grant, this is a goldmine. Elise can claim emotional abuse all she wants, but when we show the judge that she was systematically defrauding her clients while conducting an affair, her credibility is going to evaporate. What about her demand for spousal support? A spouse who commits fraud during the marriage forfeits their right to spousal support in Massachusetts. She's not getting a dime. And the business? She has no claim on assets she helped diminish through her illegal activities. If anything, you could sue her for damages to your professional reputation. I hung up feeling better than I had in weeks. But the feeling didn't last long because my phone immediately rang again. This time it was Jennifer Chen, and she sounded upset. "Grant, I just talked to Elise. She's in bad shape. She says you've been harassing her, following her, trying to destroy her career." "Jennifer, she broke into my house yesterday. I have it on security camera. She said she was just getting her things. She was looking for documents she could use against me in the divorce. That's burglary, not retrieving personal property. Look, I know you're angry, but maybe you could back off a little? Give her some space to figure things out?" I took a deep breath and tried to keep my voice level. "Jennifer, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Elise has been having an affair for months. She's been stealing money from her clients. She's been lying to everyone about where she's been and what she's been doing. I didn't drive her to this behavior. I discovered it." That's not how she tells it. "I'm sure it isn't. But I have documentation of everything I just told you. Phone records, location data, credit card receipts, billing records, facts, not stories. Even if that's true, you don't have to destroy her." "I'm not destroying her, Jennifer. I'm protecting myself from someone who's already destroyed our marriage and is now trying to destroy my business and my reputation." But Jennifer had already made up her mind, just like all the others. They were more comfortable believing that I was the villain than accepting that someone they'd known for years was capable of systematic deception and theft. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking about friendship and loyalty, and how quickly people could turn on you when it became inconvenient to support you. 12 years of marriage, and all our mutual friends had chosen Elise's version of events over documented evidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. "Corey just moved out of our house, left a note saying he needed space to think. Wanna bet he's not thinking alone?" I texted back, "How long before Elise figures out she's been replaced?" "Give it a week." It took 3 days. I was in my office Wednesday morning when Miriam knocked on my door with an expression of barely contained glee. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her phone. It was a Facebook post from someone named Amanda Walsh, a 28-year-old marketing coordinator who apparently worked in Corey's building. The post was a picture of her and Corey at a restaurant with the caption, "Finally ready to go public with my amazing boyfriend. Life is so much better when you're with someone who appreciates you." "How did you find this?" I asked. "I've been monitoring Corey's social media activity. Amanda tagged him in the post about an hour ago." I scrolled through Amanda's other recent posts. Pictures of expensive dinners, weekend trips, jewelry that was definitely beyond a marketing coordinator's salary. The same pattern Paul had described, playing out with a new victim. Has Elise seen this? Not yet, but she will. Amanda tagged about 50 people, including several who know Elise. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Elise's name on the screen, but when I answered, all I could hear was sobbing. "Elise?" "He's with someone else," she managed between sobs. "He's with someone else, and everyone can see it." "Who's with someone else?" "Don't play dumb, Grant. You know about Amanda." "I know Corey's moved on, if that's what you're asking. This is your fault. You and that snake Alicia, you drove him away." "Elise, Corey was never going to leave his wife for you. You were just his latest distraction." "That's not true. He loves me. He loves the idea of you, just like he loved the idea of the 6 women before you that he had affairs with during his marriage." The sobbing stopped. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you were never special to him. You were just convenient." I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. "You're lying." "I have documentation, Elise. Photos, receipts, phone records. Corey's been cheating on Alicia for years with multiple women. You were just the most recent." "I don't believe you." "Then ask him. Ask him about Sarah Peterson or Michelle Rodriguez or any of the others. Ask him why he never filed for divorce despite promising you he would." She hung up without another word. An hour later, Miriam knocked on my door again. "You need to see this too." This time, it was a series of angry text messages that Elise had sent to Corey, which Amanda had screenshotted and posted to Facebook with the caption, "When the crazy ex won't let go, some people need to learn when they've been replaced." The texts were illuminating. Elise calling Corey every name in the book, accusing him of using her, demanding that he explain himself, threatening to tell Amanda the truth about their relationship. Corey's responses were brief and dismissive. "It's over. Stop calling me. I'm blocking your number." "Well," Miriam said, "that's one problem solving itself." But Elise wasn't done. If she couldn't have Corey, and she couldn't win the divorce, she was going to make sure everyone suffered. That became clear Thursday evening, when I came home to find my front lawn decorated with spray-painted signs reading "cheater," "liar," and "abuser." I called the police again, filed another report, and added the vandalism to the growing file of evidence that Elise was becoming increasingly unhinged. But the signs were just the opening act. Friday morning, I woke up to find that someone had created fake social media accounts in my name and used them to send inappropriate messages to several female clients. The messages were crude and completely out of character for me, but they were convincing enough that 2 clients called to ask if I'd been hacked. "This is escalating," Terry said when I called him. "She's trying to destroy your professional reputation." "Can we stop her?" "We can try, but the damage might already be done. Social media moves fast, and people don't always wait for explanations before making judgments." He was right. By noon, I'd received calls from 3 more clients asking about the messages. One of them, a conservative family business, canceled their contract effective immediately. "I'm sorry, Grant," the owner said. "I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding, but we can't afford to be associated with this kind of controversy." I spent the afternoon working with a cybersecurity consultant to trace the fake accounts and document their creation. The trail led back to a computer at the public library, where Elise had been seen earlier that week, but proving she was the one who created the accounts would be difficult. That evening, Alicia called with news of her own. "Corey tried to break into our house today," she said. "Security cameras caught him trying to jimmy the lock on the back door." What was he looking for? Same thing Elise was looking for, probably. Documents, evidence, anything he could use to improve his position. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the steel underneath. "He didn't find anything useful, but he did find the surprise I left for him." "What kind of surprise?" "Divorce papers. Final settlement terms. He gets nothing except his personal belongings and the debt he's accumulated through his fraudulent activities." "How did he take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. Lots of yelling, some threats, a few broken dishes, then security escorted him off the property." I was starting to understand why Alicia had such a fearsome reputation in business. She approached divorce the same way she approached hostile takeovers, methodically, ruthlessly, and with overwhelming force. "What's next?" I asked. "Next, we let them finish destroying themselves. Desperate people make stupid mistakes, and both of them are getting very desperate." She was right. Over the weekend, Elise made the mistake that would finally end this war once and for all. Saturday night, she showed up at Mike and Jennifer Chen's dinner party uninvited and drunk. According to the account I got from Tom Bradley, who was there and called me afterward, she spent the evening telling anyone who would listen that I was a monster who had driven her into Corey's arms through years of emotional abuse. "She was really out of control, Grant," Tom said, slurring her words, crying, making these wild accusations. "She claimed you used to hit her, that you threatened to eliminate her, that you've been stalking her since she left." "None of that is true." "I know. That's why I'm calling." She was so obviously lying that even Jennifer started to question her story. "What finally convinced you?" when she claimed you gave her those bruises on her arms, the ones that were obviously from shooting up. I sat up straighter. Shooting up? Grant, your wife is using heroin. She had track marks all over her arms, and she was nodding off between her rants about what a terrible husband you were. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Elise's erratic behavior over the past few months, her desperate need for money, her increasingly poor judgment. She wasn't just cheating and stealing, she was using drugs. Tom, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to write down everything you remember from tonight. Everything she said, everything you observed. Can you do that? Yeah, of course. Grant, I owe you an apology. We all do. We should have listened to you instead of assuming the worst. It's okay. People believe what they want to believe. No, it's not okay. We've been your friends for years, and we turned on you based on the word of someone who was obviously falling apart. Monday morning, I took Tom's written account to Terry, along with the photos that several party guests had taken of Elise's condition Saturday night. Terry reviewed everything with the grim satisfaction of a lawyer who'd just been handed a winning case. This changes everything, he said. A spouse who's using illegal drugs and making false accusations of domestic violence has zero credibility with family court judges. What about her claims for spousal support? Going nowhere. Massachusetts doesn't award spousal support to someone who's committed fraud during the marriage and is actively using illegal drugs. And her share of the business? She's not getting anything except maybe a bill for the damage she's caused to your professional reputation. That afternoon, I got a call from Richard DeWitt. Grant, I wanted to let you know that we've filed criminal charges against your wife for fraud. The district attorney's office is taking the case. How serious are the charges? Felony fraud, multiple counts. If convicted, she's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison and full restitution to all the companies she defrauded. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I just felt tired. This was the woman I'd been married to for 12 years, and I was watching her destroy herself one bad decision at a time. Mr. DeWitt, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think I did the right thing? Exposing all of this? There was a pause. Grant, let me tell you something I learned a long time ago. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Your wife showed you that she was willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get what she wanted. You didn't make her that way. You just refused to enable it. It feels like I destroyed her life. No, son, she destroyed her own life. You just refused to let her destroy yours too. Tuesday morning, the police called to tell me that Elise had been arrested for drug possession. She'd been pulled over for erratic driving and found with heroin and drug paraphernalia in her car. She's asking for you, the officer said. Says she needs to talk to her husband. I'm not her husband anymore. The divorce was finalized yesterday. Do you want to talk to her anyway? I thought about it for a long moment. Part of me wanted to see her, to understand how someone I'd loved for 12 years had become someone I barely recognized. But a larger part of me knew that conversation would accomplish nothing except reopening wounds that were finally starting to heal. No, I said. I don't think that would be helpful for either of us. Wednesday afternoon, I was in my office when Miriam knocked on the door with a visitor. Alicia Lane stood in my doorway, looking elegant and composed as always, but with something softer in her expression than I'd seen before. I wanted to thank you, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. For what? For having the courage to do what needed to be done. If you hadn't called me that night, I might have spent years more married to a man who was stealing from me and lying to me. How are you doing with all of this? Better than I expected. It turns out that when you stop pretending everything is fine, you have a lot more energy for actually living your life. She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, it reached her eyes. I'm starting a new investment firm. Smaller, more focused, completely mine. That sounds perfect for you. I think it will be. She stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "Grant, can I give you some advice?" "Sure. Don't spend too much time looking backward. What happened to you was terrible, but it's over. You won. Now figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life." After she left, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. For months, I'd been so focused on fighting this war that I hadn't thought much about what came after winning it. My business was stronger than ever. 3 new clients had signed contracts in the past week, all of them referrals from Richard DeWitt. My reputation, which Elise had tried so hard to destroy, had actually been enhanced by the way I'd handled the situation. More importantly, I'd learned something about myself that I hadn't known before. I was stronger than I'd thought, more resilient than I'd imagined, and capable of fighting for what mattered to me. Thursday evening, I was cleaning out the last of Elise's belongings from our house, my house now, when I found a letter she'd written but never sent. It was dated 3 months ago, right around the time her affair with Corey had started. "Grant," it began, "I know I should talk to you about this, but I don't know how. I feel like we've been living parallel lives for years, like roommates who happen to share a bed. I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore. And I don't think you're in love with me either. Maybe we should talk about what that means for our future." I read the letter twice, then folded it and put it in the fireplace. She'd been right, of course. We had been living parallel lives, going through the motions of marriage without the substance of it. But instead of having an honest conversation about what that meant, she'd chosen deception and betrayal. I lit the letter and watched it burn, then poured myself a glass of bourbon and sat in my living room, looking around at the space that was finally, completely, mine. My phone rang around 9 o'clock. Tom Bradley's name on the screen. "Grant, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. What's up?" "Jennifer and I were talking, and we wanted to ask if you'd like to come to dinner this weekend. Just the 3 of us, nothing fancy. We owe you about a dozen apologies, and we'd like to start making up for being such terrible friends." I found myself smiling. I'd like that. "Good. And Grant? We're really sorry. We should have trusted you." "It's okay, Tom. People make mistakes." "Yeah, but friends shouldn't make those kinds of mistakes." After we hung up, I realized that Alicia had been right. The war was over, and I'd won. But more importantly, I'd learned who I could trust, who I could count on, and who I really was when everything was stripped away. Elise had wanted excitement, drama, a more interesting life. She'd gotten all of that, just not the way she'd expected. As for me, I'd discovered that the quiet life I'd been living wasn't boring. It was peaceful. And peace, I was learning, was underrated. 6 months later, I was having lunch with Richard DeWitt when he mentioned that Elise had been sentenced to 3 years in prison for fraud. She'd also been ordered to pay full restitution to all the companies she'd defrauded, which would probably take her the rest of her life to accomplish. "Do you feel bad for her?" he asked. I thought about it. I feel bad for the person I thought she was. But that person probably never existed. And Corey? Last I heard, he was working as a used car salesman in New Hampshire. Alicia's lawyers made sure he'll never work in finance again. DeWitt nodded approvingly. Actions have consequences. It's a lesson more people should learn. That evening, I was at home reading when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery driver with a bottle of expensive champagne and a note from Alicia. "To new beginnings and old friends. Congratulations on your freedom." I opened the champagne and poured myself a glass, then raised it in a toast to the empty room. "To finding out who people really are," I said aloud, "and to finding out who I really am." The champagne was excellent, the house was quiet, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace with my life. Outside, Boston hummed with its usual energy, full of people making choices and living with consequences. Some of them were probably cheating on their spouses, stealing from their employers, or lying to their friends. Some of them were probably about to discover that their comfortable lives were built on deception, but that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd fought my war and won it. I'd learned the difference between the people who deserved my trust and the people who didn't. And I'd discovered that sometimes the best revenge isn't elaborate schemes or public humiliation. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's bad choices destroy your life. I finished my champagne, turned off the lights, and went to bed in my own house. In my own bed, with my own conscience clear and my own future stretching out ahead of me like an open road.